This is why tipping culture is out of control. This video is made by Joshua Fluke, who I recommend subscribing to. Really good content.
Look at this new study that just came out. If you're wondering why there's these tip screens on every table in America, well, it's because people tip 11% more digitally than they do with cash.
To tip or not to tip? That appears to be the question yet again as tipping options pop up in new places.
Welcome to the tipping point. Not the psychological kind, but the kind that hits your wallet.
I'm purchasing an...
I feel it too. Like everyone else, kind of like frustrated with tipping because like everywhere you go almost, not exactly everywhere, but more places that you go to, they're asking for a tip, and you just feel it inside like, gosh, I'd feel like a jerk if I don't tip, so here's 10% or whatever, right? Everyone's feeling this, and it's really bothering everyone.
I'm purchasing an office chair online, and they're asking me if I want to leave a tip.
Today we're diving into...
So you're buying something online. Are they delivering it to you? That's the question. I didn't see that part, but let's assume that you purchased it online and you're going to go pick it up yourself. And they're asking for a tip. Now that's ridiculous.
The curious world of tipping, where it feels like every checkout screen in America has suddenly sprouted a big blinking tip me button. Gone are the days when tipping was confined to restaurants and taxis. Now, thanks to omnipresent...
Well, restaurants, taxis, you know what? I'll make a list after this of who we should be tipping and shouldn't. Restaurants, yes, I 100% agree. Taxis, your Uber drivers, I mean, there could be some discussion there, but I'll bring it up. Maybe your massage therapist, maybe your barber, people who cut your hair. There's a list, so I will go on and do this after I watch this video.
And glowing screens, everything from your barista to your self-checkout is looking for a little extra. Doesn't it seem like one day you were just buying a coffee and the next you're doing the tipping tango with a digital screen that won't let you proceed until you've awkwardly decided how generous you're feeling? You're in uncaffeinated purgatory until you tap your way out. Or maybe the ride-sharing scenario. No sooner has the vehicle stopped than your phone dings with a prompt for a tip.
Uber now displays tipping options more prominently in the app, and Dan says he's noticed the difference.
I remember Uber did not have this option. And I moved over to Lyft because Lyft had that option, and I felt more comfortable providing a tip versus like that awkwardness of that Uber driver be like, all right, thanks, bro. I don't have cash. Damn, but thanks for the ride.
The real chunk of where you made your money is tipping.
Now, sure, the driver might rely on these tips, but the prompt itself adds an instant layer of obligation, making what could be a simple transaction feel like a moral judgment.
Restaurant servers make as little as $4 an hour, and they're expected to make up the rest in tip. Should employers pay more so that people aren't so dependent on their tips?
The answer is yes. Reason being is that your pay that you're agreeing to as the employee should be handled with the employer, not with the customer. And somehow in our society, huge corporations and businesses figured out a way that if the employee does not like their pay, to channel all the world's frustrations to the customer, not towards the employer. So if you're not happy with your pay and you're very dependent on tips, that needs to be a discussion between you and the employer, not you and the customer who gave you a lowball tip. You're taking the chance. It's part of the risk, right?
You see, in the U.S., the federal minimum wage for tipped employees is $2.13 per hour, provided that this amount plus the tips received equals at least the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour. Otherwise, your company, the employer, must make up the difference. This system allows businesses, particularly in the hospitality and service industries, to legally pay significantly lower wages on the assumption that...
I honestly did not know that. I thought it was always an inconsistent income, but I didn't know there was like a low threshold that, hey, I didn't make my quota basically on what my pay should be because not enough customers wanted to tip me out. The employer has to pay you the difference. I did not know that.
Tips will cover that shortfall.
Larry Kramer says based on his years of restaurant experience, he believes the current system of tipping works best for everyone.
Some person might...
Okay, before we get on, I want to think about this. I want to comment on this one real quick. So he says it works for everyone. I think he means it works for him, not everyone, right? Because he could pay his employees low and not pay the difference, right? He could just have the customer pay their salary, and he just contributes as minimum as possible. But let's see what this guy has to say.
30%. Some person might put 18. So the server makes a lot more by getting tips. It also motivates the server to do well.
Federal law says businesses can pay
You know what would motivate the server to do well? Is when their employer has their back, not the customer.
tipped employees as little as $2.13 an hour.
Well, labor is very expensive, and any employer would love to pay employees as little as possible. $2.13 an hour for this type of work, right? You know, most people can do this work as little as possible, right? They have zero desire to raise their pay at all. Have them just hope for better tips or work harder for better tips. The customer will like you. Depend on the customer for your salary, basically, not the employer. And this is why I just don't like our tipping culture for the most part. Some people deserve it, but not be dependent on the customer. If you get what you get from the customer, there's times like, I've worked as a server too. I went from busser, runner, server. There's customers who, you provided great service and they gave you like little to no tip and you're like, what the hell? There's customers who just like give you a love bomb of money and that's awesome, but you can't expect it. You really can't. And if you're going to get mad about it, it's really a discussion between you and the employer on how you should be compensated. But this owner loves to pay as little as possible. Again, because labor is expensive, but they could wreak out more profits this way.
And the reason for that is because they expect you to make around $5.12 an hour in tips. That's $5.12 an hour the company doesn't have to pay. If you aren't making $5.12 an hour in tips, then the company has to pay out of pocket to match $7.25 an hour. I want to give you a really clear example of how this works. Here's a chart that shows you make about $6 an hour in tips. After working 8 hours, you make $65.04 as the employee, but the employer only has to pay you $17.04. Okay, now let me show you this chart with $0 an hour in tips. Your company has to pay out of pocket $40.96 to get you to the minimum wage for that day, which is $58. Now, does it make sense why companies love employing tipped workers?
Because it helps pay for the employees.
But let's imagine...
Because he doesn't want to pay them. He wants the customer, you, to pay it. That's why, it's not a reason why everything's so expensive, but it just adds on to like everything being expensive.
The sudden spread of tipping everywhere, post-COVID, a lot of consumers, not everyone, started to appreciate service workers more.
Square is a leader in these point-of-sales devices. They tell us when the pandemic started, tipping became more commonplace to support workers during those takeout orders. And that mentality appears to have stuck.
Do you know a lot of other restaurateurs?
Yes, I do.
Do they generally feel the same way that you do about the tipping structure?
I think it's pretty much a consensus now in the industry, and that's why those QSRs are adding tips to their business. Before, you wouldn't have it at a Sweet Green or a Dig or a coffee shop, but they're adding a tipping mechanism as well because it helps pay for the employees.
See, it helps pay for the employee because you don't want to make up the cost or increase their pay or anything, so this way you're dependent on the customer to pay their salaries. And what bothers me about being a customer, and when I go to these, if I'm picking up my food and I'm standing and I'm waiting on them and they expect a tip, I have no shame, but I hit no tip. Zero shame, right? And I'm sorry, but the person behind the register, they are under no position to get mad at me. If they are mad that they didn't get a tip, they should go to the employer and say, hey, I'm not getting tips, so I deserve a better compensation. I know I sound like an older generation, but I've had those jobs where I worked behind the register and I didn't have the tip option, nor would I want to think of it now. This is ridiculous. All I did was hand them their food, took their money, you're good to go.
There you go, from a business owner himself.
Because it helps pay for the employees.
That way, I don't have to. Thank you for making it exceptionally easy for everyone to know where to not work. I wonder how many people apply there after this.
As prices go up and more services outside of traditional restaurants are asking their customers if they'd like to toss in a few bucks extra. Some people are starting to feel what's been labeled as tipping fatigue.
Now, if you're anything like me, I'm sure you're wondering, does being put on the spot while someone watches you affect how much you're tipping? Turns out, absolutely.
It did for me for a little bit, but I don't care anymore. If someone's watching me hit the zero, I don't care. Who is this person behind me? If they're a stranger, I don't care who they are. I'm probably never going to see them again. Or the person at the register, they see I hit zero. That's the job you picked. There was no speculation that this job requires that you'd be getting tips. It's not like a server or bartender. Now everyone's getting tips. I don't get tips at my job. Like, it's just crazy that we've blown up of who should be getting tips these days.
Always tip because I feel like I should, but I don't always feel like I should.
That was perfect. I always tip because, the pressure to do it, but they feel like they shouldn't have, but they feel like a jerk if they didn't tip. And it's crazy to me because these are the same people who have zero problem cutting you off in traffic, riding the brakes, no turn signal, right? Jerks on the road, but face-to-face interactions, they are the most cowardice, right? Go figure.
Studies show that when other people are watching, people tip more. It's actually intricately tied to social pressures and the desire to avoid appearing stingy or unappreciative in public. Payments.com highlights research indicating that digital screens at checkout amplify this pressure significantly. Right here it says,
call me stingy all you want. After this video, I'm just going to go over who should be tipped and who shouldn't. But call me stingy all you want. Call me whatever you want. How I use my money is how I feel I should use my money. You don't have to service me if you don't want to accept my business. Let's put it that way.
social pressure drives up tips by 50%. So here's the chart, and down here you can see when no one's watching, people tip an average of 10%. When a stranger's watching, you get 12%. A family friend or the worker receiving the tip, you're probably going to tip 15%. Another chart right here shows that if you have a tip jar, people tip around 10%. But if you have a digital screen asking for that money, they tip around 15%. This part of the study is nuts. Despite most consumers, 75% of them believing that it is inappropriate for self-checkout kiosks to have the tip option, a significant portion still comply with these requests.
I'm very grateful, but I know in the future I will, that I've yet to experience this with self-checkout, that they're asking for a tip. Who am I tipping? The robot cash? Oh my God, I don't even have the words to say it. But yeah, this is crazy to me. A self-checkout kiosk asking for a tip. Who am I tipping? It's not a real person in front of me who struggled to provide me service.
59% of consumers tipped when asked to do so at a fast food establishment, and 62% of people tip at retail or grocery stores. Wait a minute.
Fast food establishment. You know what? I just remembered. I don't think McDonald's has this yet, or Burger King, or Taco Bell. Though I don't eat a lot of fast food, so I have to ask around. Maybe people in the comments can tell me if they've seen it yet. If not, it's probably coming.
You're telling me that 25% of people think it is okay for self-checkout kiosks to have a tipping option? Who's this other 25%? And now that you know how tipping works, you gotta love the CEO's take. Your ability to tip with a smartphone is important for two reasons. The first one is through retention of keeping staff who normally don't get tips, and second, it provides a simple option for guests to show their appreciation at any time without fumbling for cash. Or is that because it's money you don't have to pay them? Or how...
Yeah, I agree. It's money you don't have to pay them. The owners, the employer, it's just money they don't have to pay them. So they make the customer subsidize their salary, their pay, when it should be the employer. This is bonkers of how we've been conditioned that, oh, we should be tipping more. And now they're letting tip culture just get out of control.
How about this guy, Brian? He says that your ability to get tips could be as transformative as early wage access. Or how about this CEO, David here, who runs a bunch of hotels and partnered with this company called Shiny. So I guess Shiny allows you to tip housekeeping. We could pay people more, or we could pay for the service that allows people to tip them instead.
We've tipped housekeeping always, though. This one isn't new. If you never tipped housekeeping, I think you should. These people are picking up, cleaning up after you. You know, people leave hotel rooms as a complete mess. So I do leave a few bucks there. But I've noticed that hotel options don't have a digital tip option when you're checking out or something. Would you like to tip the person who cleaned your nasty ass room where you just filled it with nastiness? But a box or something, or a QR code to tip them? I've not seen that yet. And I still travel quite a bit in hotels. I would probably support this. Honestly, I'm not going to... Hotel keeping, I believe they deserve tips.
Instead of just paying that to our people, because I imagine you paid for this service you partnered with to allow people to tip them. Anyways, tipping is out of control. What do you think? If you enjoyed today's video, hit that like button and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Feel free.
Yeah, I like this guy a lot. Please subscribe to him. Joshua Fluke, again, I see a lot of his videos, and this is one I wanted to react to because it was really good. But I'm gonna open up like a Word document and just go over who we should tip and should not tip. Okay, I just compiled a quick list that I just looked up online of people who depend on tips for their jobs. And there's quite a lot, but I just picked a handful just for this video, and the most common that we know of, but there's more and more out there, right? So here are some, but not limited to, right? There's more for sure. So let's go with the bartender server. I automatically 20% minimum. For it to be like 10-15%, the bartender server has to have a poor attitude. I can understand if they're like super busy and they're not always on top of it. Like I've been there, like you're trying to handle all these tables, you got slammed, you're understaffed. Like I get that. I can see the stress in their face. But if they're just like plain out rude and just not having it, and they're channeling all the world's frustration on the customer, it's very rare this happens, by the way. Very rare. But it has happened where I've given 10%. But I've definitely given way above 20% for sure. I've given up to 50, almost 100% at times. With like outstanding service, person's on top of it, changing my silverware when they didn't have to, new napkins, refilling my drink without charging, stuff like that. But if I have to say, standard, minimum, 20% bartender and servers. Now, your barber, hairstylist, people cut your hair. I'd say it depends. I'd say the first one, your first interaction with one should be about 10%. But if you continue to see the person, you gradually upgrade that. You put in 15, 20%, keep going. Like my current barber, oh man, my haircut was like, what was it? It was like $25 and I gave 10. So whatever that higher math is, it's clearly well over 10-20%. But I still see these people over and over again. So when we have good conversations, have a good time, especially if you're like requesting that person to, should be giving them a good tip. I don't know how to spell therapist. I've read online about this too, and I've worked at a spa before as a front desk person. I've heard about like their tips and stuff. They all want the 20%, right? Because what was it, like 35% of like the front register? Like say the massage costs like $100 for 60 minutes. And it depends what you work at, but some of them would be like 35%. They'd get $35 of that transaction and plus whatever tip after that. So, if you gave them an extra 20, that was like $55 for the hour. So getting paid $55 an hour is great, but also they don't have a consistent schedule. So they need at least 3 to 4 customers a day. Sometimes they'll go on a day without a single customer. So it's like 100% like basically commission-based type of job. They don't get paid hourly, at least most of them that I know of. Or at least the one where I worked at. So I'd say 20% for bare minimum, right? You could argue like maybe it's the first time you interacted with this person, 10%, but then you request them again for your second visit and so on. Increase that 20% and keep going up. Now the person who just takes my order, sorry, 0%, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it anymore. Unless they did something that was exceptional, like above and beyond that they did not have to do or something, right? Like they added some free stuff, or who knows, right? Or they gave me some great tips or some great suggestions. Maybe I was like, indecisive and I'm asking a million questions. And they're answering all these questions, great suggestions, and really nice, patient with me. Sure, that's the only time I'll give the register person some extra dollars. But for the most part, if I know what I'm doing, I'm standing there, I'm waiting on you to hurry up and, just fix my sandwich together. And then you pass it to the next person, they ring it up. I'm not giving you any extra for that. You're doing your job, what was required out of you. Now, food delivery is interesting. Let's just think of pizza for right now. Like say you order a $10 pizza. And then they're going to charge you $6 on top for a delivery fee. None of that money goes to the driver, apparently. I could be wrong. Maybe it does, maybe it does not. Because I understand, as a business, you want to provide the option, but having that extra manpower to hire someone, you need to make up that difference. Okay, there's a delivery fee. And then you expect to tip that person, that one and only interaction, right? All they did, the job was they drove to your place, dropped off your food, and you're expected to tip them out, right? I'm like, I don't want to say 0%. They're just doing the jobs. Only interaction. I don't see what more they did. Did they give me extra napkins or condiments or something? Like, I don't know. It's not going to be 0%, but I'd say at least 10%. right? Unless it's the same person I see all the time, maybe I'll increase it. But, and what's crazy is like DoorDash asked if I wanted a tip in advance. If you're asking me to tip in advance, that's more of a bribe because they could choose to say yes or no to your, if they want to deliver to you or not. So the higher the tip, the more likely they're going to pick you. So you're bribing people at this point. Now, people who deliver to your front door, that's not food. Do they deserve a tip? Like Amazon. Do those drivers who come to your front door and drop off your goods, do they deserve a tip? The post office, they might drop off your stuff at the community mailbox, okay? It's their job, right? But what if you're generous and you want to tip them, right? There's no option for it, but maybe the government one day will say, would you like to tip them? You don't know. So why is it that deliveries with food, they get a tip, but all others, they don't, right? So I'll just leave this one with a question mark, right? Because it doesn't happen. Now, rideshare taxis, they're already charging you. It's whatever it is. They get a percentage of it, right? Now, to tip them, me personally, at bare minimum, if I have to leave them money, it's going to be 10%. Just so I don't feel bad or guilty, whatever. Now, if the rideshare, if I'm like a tourist, right? If I'm there and I'm asking all these questions because I'm not familiar, where to go, where not to go, best places to eat. If I'm asking all these questions, they're answering them for me and they're so great, so kind. I will increase it to 20, 25%, 30%. But for the most part, sorry, but that's the job you picked. Don't depend on me for your salary. Tour guide, same type of people, if they're doing the driving, if they're just like so awesome with what they do, they're very passionate, they're giving you all this great history, information. And again, like I said, if they're a local and you're not, and they're giving you all these great tips of where to go, where not to go and stuff like that, I would say, of course, 10%, but of course, let's do a plus. A lot of these could be a plus realistically. Yeah. Room service. After you check out at a hotel, you're not remaking the bed. Besides, they're cleaning the sheets anyway. And, you got all this trash in there. You're not taking out the trash, right? You're not being courteous, cleaning the place yourself or teeing up. A lot of room, people just trash the hell out of it. So I typically give, a minimum, like 10%, like $10 plus, especially if I'm making a mess, right? If I'm having a good time. But I'm not a messy person because most of my travels has been for work related than it is pleasure. And I'm really just in and out, but I do like to leave a few bucks over there. Valet, person who takes the keys of your car, drives your car, parks it for you, right? Because, I don't know, you want it to be fancy or whatever. They're just running to the location, coming back to you. And I don't know what the hourly salary is. I don't believe it's like 100% commission, but please comment below if I'm wrong. But I typically give them like $5, maybe 10 for whatever reason. And a lot of times it's cash because there's no real digital way to pay right now. A lot of valets, they do it in the hotel or the location, but they never ask me if I want to tip the valet. I've just not noticed it. I could be wrong though. It's been a while. Artists, like a tattoo artist, right? You're already paying a lot of money for a tattoo, and then you got a tip on top of that, right? So, they're already getting a good amount. I don't know how much a tattoo artist makes. I don't know if it's like the massage therapist where they get like a 35% or 50%. The rest goes to where they're working at. Especially if the artist does a stellar job. Especially if you're a returning customer. So now, let's go with that. I'd say at first, your first interaction, maybe they suck or whatnot. You don't want to have conflict, but you give them 10%. But if you're a returning customer, then you go plus, right? You're getting a second tattoo. You really like the work. Musicians, street performers, or even at a local bar. I not street per se, but if someone on a street like made me stop and go, wow, I want to listen to this. If they had me stop, I'll throw in a couple bucks. I don't know about $5. I don't know if I tipped $5, but I'd say, You know, you give them your extra change, right, for the street performer. But if it's like at a bar or something, and you really enjoy the music, because there's been a lot of good ones. You know, they're definitely gonna get $5+ $5+ from me, especially how long I've been there. Dealer, I'm not talking about your drug dealer. I just noticed this. I'm talking about like the casino deal, like blackjack or whatever, right? I would say, because the thing is, if I'm winning like crazy and they're giving me good tips and stuff, tips as in like, hey, you should do this move. You know, give me an example, the best course of action of when I'm playing something and I'm winning, they're definitely going to get some tips from me. It's hard for me to say a percentage on this, but of course, at least a bare minimum 10%. But if I'm just like winning like crazy, I'm definitely going to increase that. But if I lose out, I might throw them like $1 or $2 or so, whatever I have in my pocket. Honestly, sometimes I've walked away and back, sorry, I don't have anything. I had it all in chips, and sometimes I forget to keep some extra cash on me. But yeah, that's what I wanted to go over. So please feel free to comment below. Tell me what you think about this tip culture, if it's exhausting. Who deserves a tip? So if you believe with what I wrote, if you disagree, please comment below. I do read them, because maybe I'll have a different insight. You know, I'm not saying this is the be-all guide, but this is kind of what's on my mind. If it's different from yours, maybe there's a good reason. You know, some people just straight up don't tip bartenders or servers, which is crazy to me. But maybe there is a good reason for it. I don't know. But if we all stop tipping, then that means the owner is forced to pay them out of their pockets, right? Something to think about. Anyway, this is a long ending. Please comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time.